Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banko and me, Adam Moreau. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the T Work podcast. Before we begin, I want to thank Adam for covering for me while I was traveling around Europe working, even though he says I was not working. Today we
Allegedly.
have, allegedly, sure. Today we have Rod Thompson, the father of Quentin Thompson, a previous guest we had about a year ago now. So if you haven't listened to that episode, highly recommend go listen to that as well. Rod, I'm going to give a brief background, but then going to pass to you just so I don't butcher anything. From what I know, have experience in the Air Force and have been in the car auction business for a majority of your life. And Quentin has actually followed in your footsteps as well. So I just want to thank you for joining and look forward to getting into the conversation today.
Very cool. Thanks for having me for sure. Yeah, you're 100% right, Banko. My family started in the car business. Wow, I guess 55, 60 years ago. So my dad was a Chrysler dealer for 40 plus years in rural Pennsylvania. So that's kind of how I grew up. As I kind of grew up and grew through that and experienced that really wasn't something that I wanted to do, right? As that went along, I'm like, man, the last thing I want to do is be in the car business. And karma or irony or whatever circles us back around, and here we are. We're back in the car business, and Quentin's following along in the car business. So I guess maybe it's destiny that we're supposed to be in the car business.
I believe Quentin said the same thing, if I recall, on the episode that he did not want to go that way as well. He tried to go the med route with pre med, and then realized very quickly that that was not for him.
We're not smart enough for that. we're dumb car guys, man. That's how it rolls out. But no, like I say, when I was growing up, I guess I was fortunate. My dad's business partner at the time, his son was actually a fighter pilot in Vietnam. Um, and when he came back from Vietnam, this would have been late 70s. Um, he came back to the business and really, I know I was pretty young at that time, really kind of took me in and was a great mentor for me. But this is a guy with 100 plus sorties in an F4, three confirmed MiG kills, Silver Star, just a really, really well decorated guy. He come back, was in Vegas and taught at the fighter weapons school and did all those kind of things. So I think that was one of the things I was fortunate as a child. I call it a child, as a young teen, but to have that guy as a mentor for me at an early age. But he really kind of sparked my interest in the military, which was, I guess it was the idea of one being doing something completely different than what the family business was, being able to kind of leave rural Pennsylvania, kind of sparked my interest. So I had thought, hey, I really want to work for the Secret Service, CIA, something like that is really what intrigued me at the time. So when I went to the service, that was kind of, I went in under in security and intelligence. And that was my career path. That's what I wanted to do. So I was about, I don't know, through basic, partway through tech school. And they came around one day and said, hey, anybody want to try out for this, pararescue team? And I'm like, I'm young, dumb, I don't know any better. I'm like, sure, it gets me out of class. Let's go, right? So long story short, wound up getting through, the physical piece of that, and decided, yeah, that's pretty cool, and afforded me some other opportunities. So, and I thought it would be good for my career because ultimately you wind up with a top secret security clearance, and so that's one more step along the way, right? So you could kind of delve into that. So I went that route, wound up graduating, got through, a pretty, if you Google it or look it up, right? I mean, Air Force pararescue, we're not Navy SEALs, don't get me wrong, right? But it's pretty intense. So it was a great, I think, equalizer for me as a child, because again, grew up small town, rural Pennsylvania. Dad's a car dealer, had a couple other businesses. My wife always referred to it as big fish, small pond. So, it was good to get somewhere where nobody knew who you were, didn't care who you were, and whatever you earned is what you got. So, um, because, and Quentin felt a little bit of that, I think, growing up too, right? It was, well, you're so and so's son, or and I think he still gets a little bit of that today in his career just because we kind of work for the same company, right? Oh, you know, so sometimes you have to go the extra mile and do a little more to be perceived as equal. Um, so that was really what the military did for me. It got me to that point where, hey, your name doesn't matter. It's what you do. It's how you present yourself. It's how hard you work, and that's what will get you where you ultimately want to go. Um, so I think that was again one of the better things in my life. But quick story. So uh, first detail out of school, I wind up at an Air Force base, and uh, first, I guess maybe a little spoiled, had no desire to live on base. Right, I was on base about 6 weeks, and I'm like, hey, this is horrible. Right, you're living in a barracks room with some other guy, and blah 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 blah. I'm like, man, that's not for me. So I'll say selfishly, because you didn't make a whole lot of money, right? And so I called my dad and said, "Hey, this just sucks. I can't live in this, right?" So anyhow, so wound up with this nice apartment downtown, and moved in, and everything was great. And you know, I guess you kind of put your get your ears up a little bit. And I'd only been there maybe a couple of months, and I had a neighbor across the street that, hey, how you doing? Because you come in and out in your uniform and whatever, and just kind of started to kind of befriend you, and hey, what do you do? And blah 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 blah, and so you don't share a whole lot, but then they can kind of tell what you do. So we were chatting and went on for a little while, and then he just starts to ask questions. It's like, well, what's the base, right? I mean, and base I was stationed at, um, so 150 Minuteman missiles, right? We housed B-52s, KC-135s, F-15s, F-16s, uh, big nuclear weapons depot, a lot of things going on in and out of there, right?
What was the
So,
base, Rod? If I can ask.
uh,
Okay.
so when I was stationed there,
No wonder
again,
you were miserable.
but in the end, it kind of worked out because I really was never there. But initially, I was there, and it was horrible, right? But it was back then, and I can't say that it was true now because again, this is 40 plus years ago. At that time, we had 300 ICBM Minuteman missiles in the state of North Dakota, right? Plus, both of us had B-52s, what have you. So really, kind of like a superpower within itself. Um, but my primary mission had nothing to do with that. It was more um, emergency services, making sure things moved where they're supposed to. If something happened with a weapon or something like that, we kind of would clean that mess up and kind of move along, right? So, but anyhow, the guy next door keeps trying to say hello and how you doing and all that kind of stuff. And as time went, and again, didn't drag on too long, 2 or 3 months, and he kept asking little deeper questions, little deeper questions, little deeper questions, and I'm like, something's not right. Something just doesn't register here. So, you go back and you start talking about it, and so lo and behold, uh, because what he told me he did, he said he was a storm chaser. He chased storms. Well, I buy that in Kansas or Missouri or Oklahoma or whatever, but you know, I don't take North Dakota as a huge storm chaser environment, right? So anyhow, a lot of radio equipment. As you figure out down the road, he actually had wired the radio equipment to the entire roof of the apartment building. So he was using the roof of the apartment building as an antenna. So anyhow, long story short, we have a pretty significant discussion at work, and then we have to help him get relocated, right? Because he doesn't need to be there in that environment. So that was kind of my initial response in the whole service piece of it. And again, some of it we can talk more about over a cocktail sometime. But that was, in my first 6 months of being deployed, that was kind of how it started. And it was a very, very active military career. So we were TDY and moving around all the time, and which was great. But I wish, as that went along, and then my dad gets sick, and wound up going back to Pennsylvania to kind of be there. I felt that was kind of I don't want to say an obligation. I felt I owed it to him and the family to do what was the right thing. So paused that whole, hey, I'm going to the Secret Service or CIA or whatever the case may be, and had to pause that. And and then life happens, and so there's a lot of really, I guess some people say that they're colorful stories, right? But in that mix, then people come and go in there, and I wound up like, what do I do now, right? Then Dad finally is sick enough; he decides he's going to sell the car dealership. Now, what do you do, right? So I'm like, well, I'm going to go back to the service. Am I going to do something? So I said, you know what? I'm not sure I want to go back to the military at this point in time. Really love airplanes. So I went and got my commercial pilot's license. So I did that, got my commercial license. Could not, this was late 90 going into 92. So really not probably the best time to be in the airline industry. So taught a little bit, flew some stuff here in Florida. I flew canceled bank checks. I flew, if it had wings on it, I flew it to try to build some time, right? Some really shady crap. You're tapping on things, make sure they're working. Come on, that altimeter, right? Not really sure. And so I went back and said, okay, well, this isn't working out. So went back to Pennsylvania Air National Guard and tested to fly KC-135 refuelers. And so it would have been January of 92. And so whatever, well, passed the test, got a guard slot, was supposed to leave for the Pennsylvania National Guard in April of 92 to fly KC-135s. Well, the first Gulf War is ending, so all the active duty pilots are coming back, took all the Air National Guard slots. So I'm like, well, shit, I guess I'm just not supposed to fly airplanes either. So what do I know? What do I do at this point? So I said, well, maybe the car business is the thing. So we started, I'd gotten married at that point, married my wife in 1990, just before we moved to Florida. And said, well, maybe there's a new way to be in the car business without retailing cars. So we got set up to be a registered importer, and we were importing cars from Canada. So nothing overseas, just Canadian cars. So really nothing really had to be done other than speedometer changes. But you made all the money from the exchange on the dollar, right? So manufacturers didn't price cars 34 or 40% different than what they did in the US. So you could take advantage of the weaker Canadian dollar. So we were importing cars, killing it for a while, right? We were absolutely killing it. And then they came along and said, oh, hey, we're no longer going to recognize the North American Free Trade Agreement, and you've got to pay duty on all these cars, because we were paying like 2.5% of what the radio was, right? You paid maybe $60 or something like that in duty to bring a Suburban in. They said, no, we're going to charge you 2.5% on every car. And oh, by the way, we're going to go back and charge you the 2.5% on every car you've imported. And at that point in time, there were only 6 of us in the United States. right? So we all got together and tried to fight it and whatever. And then the dollar starts to tank and, so that starts to go south. And I'm like, oh shit, no, now what? Right.
Hmm.
Um, so that's how then we ultimately wound up in the motorcycle business. So I'm like, well, this isn't working out. So back to Pennsylvania, um, opened up a Yamaha motorcycle store in just outside of where my dad had the car dealership. So we had Yamaha and Kawasaki there. Started really small, grew very big. Um, but my wife was really, really unhappy in rural Pennsylvania after being in Florida. Because part of the story that I didn't share was so when we're in Florida, we built this brand new home in Brandon, Florida. Quentin was a year old when we moved into it. Built a brand new home and a gated golf course, private community, beautiful home, right? And all this is happening. I tell her we're going back to Pennsylvania, and then I share with her, oh, by the way, we have to sell the house because I'm going to use the money from the house in order to start this motorcycle store. So she looked at me like, one, you got three heads. And then when I told her, oh, hey, we're probably going to have to live in a trailer for a little while, right? So we go from somewhere really nice to rural Pennsylvania in a trailer. So she was a really good sport.
Yeah, good thing Kim loves you.
Best thing for us, and I promised, hey, within a year, we'll build a new home. Life will be good. Everything's fine. So the year came and went, and I didn't build a house, and because the business was doing really well, but it took every dollar we were making in order to continue to grow the business, right? So we just kept investing. So 1 year goes by, 2 years goes by, 3 years goes by. We get to the fourth year. She's like, "Hey, Rod, this just isn't cutting it, buddy. You gotta either you're building me a house or we're you're gonna have to find something else because this doesn't work." So we got fortunate that a guy that I had done a lot of business with, sold a lot of motorcycles to, was looking to buy it. Um, so we wound up selling the motorcycle store, come back to Florida, um, and that made her happy. And I wound up then in the working for Sea-Doo at the time. So I was a regional sales director for Sea-Doo. So I covered 19 states, had 9 district managers that worked for me. And so I had Sea-Doo, Ski-Doo. I was part of the go-to-market committee for the new Spider. Did a lot of really interesting things in that. But as you can imagine, it came with a tremendous amount of travel. So not to exaggerate, but I left either a Sunday night or a Monday morning and came home on Friday, 46 weeks a year. So, Kim's left raising Quentin really, I don't want to say on her own, but I mean, the majority of the time was on her own. So we, that went along for a while. And I felt then it's like, hey, some things are more important. That's a fantastic job. If I was Quentin right now at 30, single, that's probably the greatest job you could have on the planet, right? Because I mean, you get to ride all the really cool stuff and travel everywhere and, do whatever you want to do. It's fantastic. But so I come home one day and just said, hey, you know what, Kim, I need to take a pause. So I resigned and I took 2 years off. I took 2 years and just spent it at home, spent it with Quentin, kind of re-engaged, got, just kind of grounded myself again. And then we decided we'll figure out what we're going to do from here. And while that was happening, I was going back and forth between Florida and Pennsylvania, buying some ATVs. My dad still had the used car facility in Pennsylvania. So I'd buy ATVs in Florida, send them to Pennsylvania, put them on Craigslist at the time, sell them. He'd collect the money, send me the money, and I'd go buy some more. And, we're just kind of moving around. And one of the times I went up and picked up my dad, and we went over to Indianapolis to a motorcycle auction. And while we were having dinner with some folks, it was with Manheim Auto Auctions. The lady that ran the specialty division, we were chatting, and she's like, "Hey, you ought to. We're going to open up a new specialty sale in Florida. with Harley and HSBC and everybody, but you ought to come and run that for us. And I'm like, no, thank you, lady. I've had all that corporate stuff I ever want to see. I'm good, right? And so we kind of left it there, chuckled, and went on about our business. And, a couple months later, she called again, and she said, "Hey, I was serious about that. Harley Davidson's coming, and with your background and blah 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 blah, it'd be a fantastic fit." I said, her name was Kim. I said, "Kim, I truly appreciate it. Thanks for thinking of me, but this corporate stuff just isn't for me." So we went on, and about 2 months later, she called me again. She said, "Look, we really want you to run this specialty division." And so anyhow, long story, they talked me into it. So get into the motorcycle business with specialty. We had a big sale here in Daytona Beach, and did really well. And then, of course, Manheim's like, "Oh, hey, you've done really well. We'd like you to kind of bridge over to the car side and, kind of do some more and that kind of stuff." And I'm like, "I don't want anything to do with those cars. That stuff's bad news. It's just a problem. No, thank you." And so anyhow, a couple years later, they convinced me, "Hey, we want you to be an AGM at this location and turn it around and whatever." So I did that. Then they kept trying to transfer us. They go to Baltimore, go to Wisconsin, go somewhere. I'm like, "I'm not going." So finally they said, "Hey, we really need you to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma." And at this time, Quentin's now graduated. He's first year of college here. And my wife and I said, "Yeah, it's pretty lucrative for us. Let's give it a shot." So wound up out there. About 2 or 3 years into that, then ADESA approached me and said, "Hey, we've got an auction in Tulsa that's really struggling. Would you consider being a GM there?" I'm like, I said, "Maybe, we can chat about it." So anyhow, we have a couple conversations. I said, "I'll tell you what, if you can promise me that you'll get me back to Florida in 3 to 5 years, I'm your guy." So they guaranteed I'd be back in 3 to 5, and so we made that switch, and it's been, I made a career now out of being the guy who goes in to underperforming auctions, kind of cleans them up, creates processes, um, builds teams, and gets them turned around, and then move on and do another one. So I think through all the lessons in my life, military, 4 key takeaways. One, you plan, you brief, you execute, and you debrief. And the same things apply in the corporate world. When you have to kind of turn something around, those are, from a process or a strategy perspective, that's what it looks like. And the other piece of it is how do you communicate then with all the different personalities? And I think that's, I guess, maybe all the things that have happened to me in my life. I've had to learn how to communicate regardless of where you sit on the ladder, as well as how you really react. Because I've said this, and I've tried to teach this to Quentin, is I can say the same thing to 4 different people, and everyone can perceive that exact same message 4 different ways. And being able to understand an audience, who you're talking to, what motivates them, how do you craft the message to get the most out of them in order to deliver a result. And I think that's really has been my strength, and has gotten me to where I am. So that's a down and dirty of Rod Thompson, right? So it has some color blended in there too. So, but I'm sure we just bore everybody about some of it. So
No, that was a perfect summary of your life, and there's probably 10 to 20 questions both of us have on each part of that story. The one thing I'll say before we dive into those questions, you sort of skipped over one other thing about cars have always been kind of your destiny slash karma. How you met Kim initially.
Yeah. So working for my dad, and lo and behold, girl comes walking through the door, and at that time, kind of shorts, blonde hair, and I'm like, oh, I'll wait on that one, right? So anyhow, met her, took her for a test drive in a car, come back, wound up putting a car deal together, and then car business, you always send thank you notes and whatever, but I'm like, I don't know, she's kind of hot. Maybe I ought to follow up a little different on this one. So I actually went and got a real card and hand wrote a note and mailed that card rather than the traditional thank you card, right? And so she got that, and one of the ladies that she worked with, she was a director of sales for a hotel. I had sold the general manager at that hotel a car, and her husband a car, and that kind of thing. So, and she said to her, she said, "Hey, is this normal? Did he send you a card like this?" And they're like, no. So anyhow, you get the car to get out, and a couple of days later, I picked up the phone and said, "Hey, I just want to make sure everything's okay with the car," and yada 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 yada. And I said, "No, by the way, would you like to have lunch?" And I think I caught her by surprise, and but she said yes. So we had lunch, and we'll say the rest was kind of history. So I sold her a car. And then after we got married, then I had to sell that car. So thank God I didn't just bury her in something, right? Because it's like that one was going to come back to haunt me. It's like,
What car was it?
I sold her at that time, it was a 1987 Chrysler LeBaron Coupe, rosewood color with Cordovan interior. And she traded me. She was driving a Shelby Charger with a turbo 5-speed sunroof. So I'm like, hey, my kind of girl, right? I got myself a little hot rod, and I took that car on trade, and then that worked out really well though. Took that car on trade. Then I had a guy trade me at that time a 77 Corvette for that 87 Shelby, and I made a killing on the Corvette, right? So it did work out pretty good for Rod in the end, but yeah, that's how we met. And she's been, we've moved. Not to exaggerate, I think we counted at one time. I think we've had 13 major moves in our life together. She stuck through the craziness of all of that stuff, and she's still around. So I lucked out there.
If I can hop in now and ask a few questions, and yes, all the props to Kim. She has definitely put up with a lot from the Thompson boys as a whole. So we appreciate everything she does for those that we care about. There's no question about that. But one of the things that has become evident to me is you are willing to take the step, whatever it is, whether it's going somewhere new, trying something new. When did that start for you? Was that always who you were, or were you just at a point where you were kind of searching for yourself?
You know what? I think you just hit it on the head, right? The military was, you traveled, but that was just a job. It just traveled. Then once I thought when I was asked to come back and get into the car business, I thought, okay, this is my destiny. I'm going to be in Eau Claire, Pennsylvania for the rest of my life selling cars, and that's what it is. And when that kind of went away, I think I lost my identity. I really had no idea who I was. I felt I was at that point kind of defined by, small town Pennsylvania, big fish, small pond. Now that's all gone. The opportunity to go back and try to resurrect a Secret Service CIA career was really too far down the road for that to take place, and tried to figure out who I was, and it took a little while. I think all those things kind of moved along, and each piece added a layer, and sometimes you may be a little overconfident, and sometimes maybe not confident enough. But until I think I realized what my real, everybody has a gift, right? And what that gift may be. And I think it took me a long time to realize my gift, if I have one, is the ability to extract the most out of others, right? I can take a team that is significantly underperforming and not demolish the team and bring in new people, but to take that same group of people then and turn that around to be some of the most successful auctions, in the country. And it's just been, so they laugh and say, oh, it's just a knack, right? But, like you can use Orlando as an example. Orlando here was underperforming for years. Just started at a point when we bought it and it just kept decreasing. In the first year there, didn't change a single person other than myself. We grew overall profitability by 50%. We work off of an EBITDA margin, right? Publicly traded EBITDA margin. Our EBITDA margin grew 15 full points. We went from a 26, 27% EBITDA margin to a 41, and made 50% more money in the first full year. So, and again, it was with the same people. All they needed to do was to focus. They needed to understand the why. Why are all these things important? What are the steps? So we always coach the why. We always coach try to give as much of the big picture as you can, but break it down into small bites, and everybody has their piece. And really getting I call it boots on the ground, frontline employees to really understand how significant and important they are. So that person that thinks, oh, hey, I'm just a check-in person, or I'm just a CR writer, or I'm just a transportation clerk, or whatever that may be. I always hear that. And I'm like, no one is just right? If the car isn't dispatched on time, picked up on time, checked in correctly, the CR isn't written correctly, it doesn't get shopped correctly, it doesn't get through the mech shop correctly, it doesn't get detailed, it doesn't get on spot, all those things, every one of those are an opportunity for a failure. So getting them to align and also understand how what they do or don't do affects all their team members down the pipeline, right? The funnel flows. In the auction business, we joke and we say, our auctions are Tuesday at 2:00. The sale is going to happen Tuesday at 2:00, whether you're ready or you're not. There's not an option. It's going to happen. So the work has to get done. When are we going to do the work? So we can either divide that up over the other 6 days of the week, or we can, have this hair on fire drill every single week, trying to get it done and create a lot of, tension and angst and all those kind of things. And you make mistakes. So that's really one of the biggest things we do. We try to strip that away, break it into small bites, move it along, and get the management team communicating. Okay, what's the message? What are we doing? What are we following up on? Right? Because if the team fails, that means we failed. What didn't we do? We should have done something different. We should have coached that different. We should have had a better SOP. We should have had, did we really brief the plan? Did we really look at execution from last week? Did we have those conversations, right? Are the stakeholders engaged? Are they involved? All that's what really makes it all work.
I want to jump in, and I do have a question, but I want to first say it's funny hearing you use military jargon as well, because I have a coworker, our chief of staff, that's from the military, and he joined probably 6 or 7 months ago, and he sets up certain meetings and definitely uses military jargon, and some people are like, why are we using this terminology? So it's just funny to hear that that's common across another military person as well. But going back to finding your gift or discovering what your gift was, how did you actually figure that out? How long did it take you to figure that out?
I think it took me, to be fair, probably 10 years, and some reading, some failures. And when I say failure, right? Early on, when you talk about turning things around, when you go in and you fix something, I had situations where I went in, I would fix a site, when I would leave, and when I left, it would just all fall and crumble. And I scratched my head. I'm like, well, I just left this place just booming. Why did it fall apart? And what I learned from that was I wasn't teaching, I was doing. So I would kind of instruct and show, but never really taught them how to carry it on and make it better when I left. And there was a book a boss gave me. It was called Good to Great. And after I read that, I saw so much of myself where, hey, it's not about you. It's about what are you teaching? What's the legacy? What does that look like? And I think that was probably the pivotal turning point. And then I started to really kind of dig into some other books. Right, there's some really simple ones. Gung Ho is one that we always use. Really simple. Extreme ownership and flawless execution. Those and flawless execution came from my Mannheim days, right? Written by Navy Blue Angels, right? Extreme ownership was by Navy SEALs. So yes, there's a lot of correlation in that between the military and corporate world. You can't be. I don't think you can be a militant style leader in today's environment and get people to bite into that. But the method can be, how do we allow others to be a part of where we're going, right? Someone told me one time, hey, people support best what they help create. So we took that and said, okay, well, when we really have a complex problem, or do we have all the stakeholders? And then do we honestly have the people doing the work involved? They can probably tell us 100 things that we won't ever see because they're doing the job every single day. So we try to take that and filter it up. And then, as part of that input is also share then back why, hey, yeah, that would work, but have you thought about how that would affect this, right? So it becomes a learning opportunity for them too. But for me, it was really, I'll say it was a tough 10 years trying to figure out what that was. I felt I was really good at sales. I felt I had that ability. But again, you could go wide open, and the same thing with some of the teams. It was like, yeah, we killed it. But then when you step back, I never took the time early on either to, like, on a sales environment, to reward the small wins. I did the big ones, but I did a horrible job of, hey, you know what? This salesperson, he did 2% better this month than he did the month prior. I didn't say, hey, great job, keep it up. What do we need to do to get you to 4% or 5%? The guy that was 25%, hey, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, buddy. You're rah, rah, rah. So I learned how to reward the small wins and get them more vested. And over time, they actually wound up being better producers because they became more consistent. Some of my biggest producers, they would boom and bust and boom and bust and boom and bust. So those guys that you really took time and developed and brought them along, they were very consistent because they were bought in, they were engaged, they were all those things. And that really paid dividends for me. But
I'm going to question probably a funky one because I don't know it all too well, but maybe your struggles with celebrating the consistency and focusing on those big booming successes that maybe weren't always sustainable. Do you think some of that stems back from what you experienced in the military, or kind of like Rust Belt mentality where you're always just expected to get things done? It's hard to celebrate the wins, or I guess it's hard to celebrate what's expected of you. And the only time you really ever step back and applaud or cheer is when you win one of your 6 Super Bowls, for example.
that's probably really accurate, right? First, I'm a horrible loser, and I know that about myself. Hate to lose, super competitive, have always been that way. But when I was a kid growing up, and again, small town Pennsylvania, right? Big fish, small pond. I used to hear it even from high school teachers because my dad was also the president of the school board, right? So I would hear it even at school. Wow, you'll never amount to anything if you don't have your dad's money, blah, 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 and so you hear that your whole life growing up, right? It's like, you're never going to amount to anything because the only reason you're anybody is because of who you are, what your name is, that kind of thing, right? So for me, that became I internalized that and said, you know what? I am that good. I have to perform at this level every single day for someone just to recognize me as being average. So then I expect that from everyone else. And my wife said the same thing. I'm my own worst critic. Nothing's ever good enough, right? It can always be a little better, all those kind of things. So, and maybe I've just gotten a little older, so I've mellowed a little bit with age. But I think you're spot on. I think it's just part of that internal drive to prove someone else wrong. You're not right about me, right? It's not about dad's money. It's about what I've accomplished. And I think that's so. I always try to look at it from that lens.
You can keep going, Adam.
Oh, okay. Well, then I shall continue. Thank you. I thought we got comfortable with our back and forth. So yeah, no worries. I'll keep on ripping. So I appreciate you sharing that, and obviously I'm trying to poke and prod a little bit because I feel like this is where we get into the I don't know, the weeds a little bit and get into the fun stuff. But now I do want to go all the way back. Early on, I was super curious about your first jobs at the dealership that your father was running. So everything you just said, like you'll never amount to anything without your father's money or his connections or whatever. But you alluded to it way back at the beginning of this. You were working as a young teen. So it's not like you waited till you were 18 to get a job. I'm assuming the second you were allowed to start working legally or illegally, you were put to work in some capacity. And I'm curious what having to work to earn something meant to you then, and has that stuck with you your whole life?
Absolutely, right. So, quick story. So, my job at night, my dad would come home for dinner. We lived a couple miles from a dealership. He'd come home 5 o'clock. I'd make sure I had my homework done. I had to go back, and we had a 17 bay service facility, so 17 lifts, service bays. So every night, those bays had to be scrubbed down. So I'm 11, 12 years old. I went to work. I'd go back to work with them, and I had to wet the floors, pick all the lifts up, wet the floors, put soap on them, scrub them with a broom, rinse the floors, squeegee the floors, roll up all the air hoses, make sure everything was put back in place. That was my job every night, 6 days a week, right? So at 12. And we had at that time one of those tenant machines, like a floor scrubber, right? And I said to my dad, I said, why do I have to scrub these floors with a broom and a squeegee and a hose? And there's this machine sitting over here that I can be done in an hour. And probably one of the best messages I ever got, and I didn't get it at that point in time. He said, Rod, everybody can sweep the middle of the floor. All my money's in the corners. There's 2% over there, and there's 2% over there, and there's 2% over there. And he said, if you brought your car to me to have it serviced and you walked in the service department and there was grease on the floor and rags laying all over the place and the floors were dirty and air hoses laying everywhere, how would you think I'm going to take care of your car? And at 12, all I cared about was using the machine, right? I just want to do the thing and move on down the road. But I use that analogy even today in what I do. Everybody can sweep the middle of the floor, but it's the guy that's willing to go clean the corners is the guy that's going to be successful. So that was a great lesson. So that was then. Then my dad also he was a school bus contractor. So in Pennsylvania, the school buses were contracted out to like subcontractors. So we had school buses. So every weekend, the buses had to be washed, right? So you have to scrub the buses. If the bus come home and have had a flat tire, the tire has to be changed. It's got to be greased, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have to change oil and that stuff. We had a mechanic to do that. But if it was 10 o'clock at night and the bus had a flat tire and the bus has to leave at 6:30 next morning, guess who's changing the tire, right? And it's Pennsylvania. It's cold, so you're firing up the coal stove and you're breaking tires down and you're putting them together and you're getting back up and going to school in the morning. So, and the other part was I get up at 5:30 during bus season. I went out and made sure the buses were started and make sure everything was running before the drivers got there. So, so that was how I grew up. That was just how it worked. At 13 years old, I'm driving school buses around, right? It's like, hey, they got to go over here, or whatever it was. It was like, that's what has to happen. So you just did it. That work ethic, I think, was instilled in me at that point in time. It's like, because and I shared with Quentin, it's like, I said, pre-med, probably not a Thompson thing, right? We're never going to be the sharpest pencil in the box. But I'll go out on a limb and say, you'll find very few that will outwork us. Right. I'll go toe to toe with anybody and spend the hours, do the work, dig in. What do I have to do in order to make this work? And I think that separates most people today. I've seen so many changes with people. Hey, I want to show up at 9 o'clock. I want to go home at 4. I don't want to work any overtime. And some folks expect to make a big wage and do that. And others are perfectly fine with the wage they're earning, but they don't want to give up their time. Right. And there's two sides to that, I guess. But I think finding balance, right? You can't come to me and say, hey, I want to live in a gated community on a golf course and have all this stuff and drive a BMW and work 9 to 5 for an average job, right? That's just not reality. And that was, again, a conversation with Quentin, right? It's like, I don't care what you do in life. I want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy, right? But there's also a reality. You have to decide what your standard of living you're comfortable with, right? If you're comfortable driving a 10-year-old car, living in a small house in rural Pennsylvania, bless you, right? Then you can go be a whatever, make yourself 30, 40 grand a year and life's all good, right? If that makes you happy, fantastic. But if that's not what you want, if you want to drive a BMW and you want a big house and you want to go on vacation, you want to do all this stuff, well, there are career fields and jobs that will support that. And that's where you have to make that decision, right? What do you want to do? How do you want to live? And then find your own personal balance within that. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there's been a lot of consistencies throughout a lot of your stories. And I'm also relating it to how Quentin described his phone call on the podcast with him when he got fired from his job with you. And your first words out of your mouth were figure it out. There was no second guessing that. It was, that's life, move on, you figure it out, it'll happen, and it'll all work out. I think that's also a good thing to point out in the sense of you said it took you 10 years to figure out your gift. But for those 10 years, you didn't just sit and wait and hope that it came to you. You met Kim, you started your family, you moved a couple times, you had different jobs. Like, you were doing things, and I think that shouldn't be overlooked, where a lot of people are like, oh, I'll just wait 10 years and then my life will be great. No, you were doing things consistently throughout that time period. And I think that relates a lot back to how you were raised, which, I didn't know any of this about your childhood, but it makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, it was, like I say, my childhood was both a blessing and a curse, right? I did a lot of things at a very young age. I was 13 years old and I was drag racing cars. I had an NHRA driver's license when I was 14. I had some really trick stuff. And that stemmed around my dad's partner. when he came back from the service, that was one of the things we did. We raced cars, so, very few kids had, I mean, got to do the things that I got to do at a very young age. Right. But by the same token, I worked really hard outside of that. And I think that kind of got outsiders overlooked that. All they saw was this piece over here, and they didn't see, hey, you're up at 5 a.m, or up at 10 at night, you're doing this, doing that. They never see any of that. Right. So yeah, it was good.
I wanted to hop in, Banko. I didn't want to completely hijack the podcast and go 3 or 4 in a row. So I'm glad you took over for a moment. But I wanted to hop back in and discuss, I guess, how crazy it is for me to hear how much Rod was told, you'll never amount to anything without your dad. You'll never be able to do these things without your dad. But they didn't see the work that you were putting in literally in the dark to not just support yourself, but also support your dad. And I'm sure you at some point were a loudmouth teenager and probably fired back at a person or two, telling them they don't know what you do, they don't know your life, whatever phrase fit the time or the relationship that you may have had with the individual. But now I want to get into, I guess, the role of being humble, because I'm sure you mouthed off at some point if someone really didn't see the work that you were putting in. And you were working a full-time job basically on top of being a high school student and then just being a kid and going out and having fun, like you said, drag racing. So I'd love to just hear what it, like, being humble means to you, but also then maybe when is it time to step out and scream from the rooftops what you can do, what you have done, and how much you value what you've accomplished?
Um, the two most humbling, I think, experiences for me. One, the day I stepped off the bus when I went to the service, right? That was without a doubt, nobody cared, right? Who you were, where you came from, anything else. That was the first one. And I think the last, it was kind of a series, but I think where I probably maybe humbled myself the most is when I realized what my gift was, right? I was no longer chasing something, right? And not that I'm not chasing things, but I was no longer chasing my identity. And that allowed me then to take just a giant gulp of air and say, you know what, it's okay. And I think those two moments were most pivotal. But yeah, when I was in high school, and I can still remember, I'm in gym class and a gym teacher, standing there poking me in the chest saying, you'll never amount to anything. You just, things that, if you said those things to a kid today, I mean, it would just be, just a whole nother level. Right. And again, my dad's the president of the school board, you know what I mean? And this guy's just unloading on me. And I think, I didn't fight back more with adults, but some of the kids did, because the kids got really old, right? It's like, oh, hey, you know what, and and I'm like, so you wind up in a few fights, you take out a little aggression and what have you, and it's just like, I don't think some of them expected that, right? It's like, oh yeah, he's a pussy, whatever, right? And I could scrap a little, right? And we did. So then it, I'll say it changed, But then I guess I made my own situation worse because when I got to be a junior in high school, I started dating the principal's daughter, right? So that didn't help my cause a whole lot. It got me out of a lot of class, but so you kind of had that. Well, but again, small town. I mean, my high school class, I think I graduated, 140 people. You know what I mean? And that's probably big in today's standards. Like 7 to 12, we had 1,200 kids, right? So not a big class, but those, and I think honestly, and that's what created such an internal fire for me. But it also created my work ethic. I mean, all the things that my dad taught me, but it was, I think, that drive to be, I always felt I had to prove myself every single day. I've got to be better. And I still find that today, right? I probably don't show it as much as I did back then, but still it's like, I get to the end of a month and we didn't have this killer month. I look at it and say, what the hell, I could have done better, right? I mean, man, Rod, you're better than this. It's, but you also, then I find myself, you know what? Not every month is perfect. They're not all huge wins. These things happen. What did we do to adjust or course correct in order to make ourselves better going forward? And I'm learning to kind of take care of that piece of it for me.
You answered my next question in that answer. I was going to ask, do you feel that if you didn't get picked on like you did of being like, oh, who your dad was, that you'd be a different person today and your work ethic? And you kind of answered that in that answer. So I'll move on to a slightly different question. Looking back on sort of your life, do you have any regrets or wish you would have done something different throughout your adult life or kid life in general?
Honestly, yes. And I'll say, and I don't know that it's as much as of a regret. I passed on a scholarship to West Point. So looking back, because I really didn't want to be an Army guy. So that really wasn't my thing. But looking back at it and what I know today and I guess the history of my life, what got me to where I am now, I'm blessed to be where I am today. But I think that I think I thrive a little bit on that structure. So I think that would have been really good for me. I think it would have been, again, I would have been completely separate from anything to do with the car business, anything to do with Pennsylvania. It was my military career and you earn what you get, right? So I think that would have been, if I had the opportunity to go back today, I would go back and spend my entire career in the military.
And what's the reasoning behind that? Just the structure?
But I think also there's there's some stability. I think the ups and downs were really hard, right? And I guess when my career was, we were up and down between importing cars and a motorcycle dealership and stuff like. I still had a wife and a son to care for, right? So there still has to be food on the table. There still has to be a roof over their head. There still has to be clothes. Those things still have to happen, right? There's not an option. And I was never going to be the guy that said, oh, hey, Dad, I need X, right? I'm in trouble. I don't have any money. I can't feed my kids. Because I'm going to be honest with you. I have a brother that's 8 years older. And I don't know that he's worked 10 full years in his entire life. Right? He's done everything that Dad paid for, whether that was got him in the coal business, bought him a bar, bought him 2 bars actually, had coal trucks. He had the last thing in life was he was raising quarter horses, right? Well, quarter horses, it's a pretty expensive little operation, right? Never really earned anything. And I look at his kids today, and the majority of them are the same way, especially the oldest one. The oldest one thinks Grandpa just going to pay for everything. Well, you know what I tell you, but Grandpa kicked the bucket, and Dad already burned all the money, so there isn't anything, right? I don't tell you. My brother spent more money than most of us will ever see in a lifetime, right? I'm talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? Just because, when he had the bar, it was, oh, well, man, you got to go place a food order and a liquor order, and you got to be there all the time. That's not really conducive for me. And when you had coal trucks, well, you got to get up and drive them. Oh, hey, they break down. Oh, hey, you got to fix them. Oh, that really didn't work. And so it was just like that was. So we were completely polar opposite people. And I would see that because he's 8 years older than I am. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be that. I think, and I don't know if he, I don't know if he resented or was jealous or whatever the case may be, of choices I made and some along the way, versus what he was doing, but when I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, he's already married and off. And so it was like, I really didn't have a brother. You know what I mean? It was like, we were just completely different people, especially back in those times. And I spent all my time with my mentor, if it wasn't with my dad. So that was really, we just grew up with completely different set of ideals. Listening to my guy tell me stories about, being upside down, in an F4 in a dogfight in Vietnam, and looking at the eyes of a Vietnam pilot, right, and shooting him out of the air. Those stories resonated with me, right? And here's a guy that's really, had something to lend and coach and teach, and I didn't have that on the other side. So yeah, very, very different. And I guess I'm glad it's who made me who I am.
It's a little bit funky seeing how we spent so much time talking about what formed you years ago. And I guess that's the nature of these things, right? How do we know who you are today if we don't go back, just tracing the dots that led you to this point? But I do want to spend a little bit of time before we let you go today talking about what you are doing now. You talked about your ability to unite teams and teach, and those being things that you really do take a lot of pride in. And it's not that the industry is completely shifted, but there's innovation, things change. So I'd be curious to know what are maybe some things that you are still working to get better at today, or you feel when you look internally that you can do a better job of.
You're 100% right. I think for me, I have to work harder at understanding and embracing technology and how fast that's moving in our industry. In the auction business, it used to be cars would be staged, you drive them through the auction, and auctioneer would auction them off and you move on. Now you've got simulcast, right? So you've got bidders from all over the country bidding on the same cars, this guy standing in the lane. We have condition reports that are, really detailed. So how that technology, and we're starting to blend some AI into some of that kind of stuff. So those two pieces coupled with, I think the industry wants to move in a direction where we never put a car through an auction lane again, where it's, I'll call it Amazon it, right? But where the technology is good enough that we can represent the car accurately every single time, that the dealer, no matter where he is, can buy that car with confidence and say, yeah, the car you told me I was getting is a car I got, is what I expected. But that's where we're going with Carvana, which is our parent company, right? One, they only retail cars online, right? You buy everything is a completely online experience. You don't know where to go and talk to a salesman. So whether it's financing, looking at the car, they'll buy your car, you can trade your car, all that stuff is all done online. And now they have, as they've acquired us, now they look at, okay, all the Carvana trades and all the cars that they buy off the street, how are we selling those? Well, they built a completely separate platform that's all completely digital, which we have 3 auctions a week, and we sell cars every single week. That's completely a digital experience, right? So there is no in-lane buyer. There is none of that presence. So as that moves, what I hope doesn't happen is that we disconnect from the relationships with the dealer network itself, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity. Again, I'm just seeing the early phases of AI in our industry, but it's coming fast and furious, right? But the digital experience, then people get disconnected. And what I don't want to see happen is where it just becomes this completely, hey, I bought the car on my phone, Joe Bag of Donuts, transporter's picking the car up, going to drop it over here, I'm going to retail the car, and there's never any interaction, right? That's not the car business as I know it, but I think it's the car business of the future. I think Carvana has done an amazing job of creating a completely new way to buy a car, a completely digital experience that's transparent, and it's proven to be very successful, right? If you look at our stock today, the last 2 or 3 quarters, we are the most profitable automotive publicly traded retailer in the country, right? And just really, to our CEO, he's like, hey, we're just getting started, right? First quarter this year, I think we sold 140,000 retail cars. Our goal within 5 to 10 years is to retail 3 million cars a year, right? And that was one of the biggest reasons for the acquisition of ADESA for Carvana, was it gave them 56 new footprints that they can acquire cars, recondition cars, sell a car, deliver a car from, and the car never leave that piece of property, right? So same day delivery, those are the pieces, right? You order a car from Carvana and not all locations, but a lot of locations, and that's our future is, hey, you order it today at 2:00, it'll be at your door at 5:30, right? That's what they want to happen. And I think that's going to continue to transform the auto industry, and others are going to try to duplicate. But the dollars it takes in order to try to do that in the time it would take is astronomical to build a footprint. We have 56 auction locations and 12 ICs. We've got 68 locations. If all of those are built out, we can deliver cars same day to 98% of the US population. That's pretty amazing. So
I'd say that's decent innovation. And yeah, good answer to the question.
Yep, that's where it's going.
That's crazy. No, I appreciate you going in detail on that. Not just what you need to improve on, but really where you guys are headed as a whole, because obviously you're very passionate about the group you're with and you've been a major part of the growth. And Banko, do you want to hop back in here? Or you want me to keep on cooking?
Well, I was gonna ask, I mean, so I know we're at sort of time check with 9 minutes left. Do you
That's
have any
right.
more serious questions, Adam? Or do we want to get into the fun questions?
Nah, you can go for the fun. I'm happy to keep poking and prodding, but I'm afraid that's going to take us into the cocktail territory that Rod mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
So I have 2 fun questions. The first one should be quick. How is the push-up challenge, or what you're trying to accomplish going?
I'm up to 52s.
Okay.
So I hurt my back a week and a half ago. So I thought that was going to slow me down. But I'm on 52s all this week. So next week will be 53s. Goals will be 55 by the end of July, and then be to the 60 mark at the end of August. That gives me 2 months to make sure I can do them every day.
So what is this? Can I get some detail behind it?
So this year is a milestone for me. I turned 60 this year in October. So as I went into this year, I'm like, you know what? I want to be able to do my age in consecutive push-ups every single day. So I started because I work out fairly regular, but I would do, 30 regular push-ups, 30 wide push-ups, 30, together push-ups, close togethers, and it was just what I did. So I did that. But then when you start going, I'm like, I want to do 60 consecutive. So, you get to 35, 36 when I was doing 30s, it's like, you start to feel that a little bit, right? And then it went and I got to 40, 45 pretty easy. And then once you kind of get past the 45, even now at 52, about 47, 48, you start to feel them, right? It's like, oh man, and I'm trying to do it conservative enough that I don't want to hurt myself and set myself backwards because I am old. But to make sure that I'm on target. So I could probably push it and be to 60 by the end of July, but I think I'm just going to kind of ride it out. And then I want to try to maintain that. So if I can do 60 every day, and then next year it'll be 61, right? And we got to keep going. So that's my
nice. I was curious. Yeah. I forgot Adam didn't have the background, so that was good. The other fun question is having the inside scoop on dealerships and maintenance of cars. When you take your car in for an oil change or some other mechanical issue, how much of the upsells that dealerships pitch to you are actually necessary versus them just trying to make an extra buck?
98% of what they're pitching you is useless.
So what is necessary? Maybe the immediate follow-up to that is when it comes to consistent run-of-the-mill car care for guys like Banko and I who really just use our car for point A to point B, take very little pride in it as a whole. What do we need to be cognizant of?
You know what? Be consistent with your oil changes, right? I mean, and now everything kind of has a gauge in it. I used to say 5,000 miles. That's really not the case now. I mean, you let the meter tell you, but before it hits 0% of oil life left, get it changed, right? Because what happens if you don't do that, you'll wind up creating sludge, right, in there. So that's a big one. Service the transmission every 50,000 miles. Change the air filter. Change your cabin air filter. If you do those things, your car will last you a long time. Because the only other thing you really get into anymore is maybe a serpentine belt, brakes. Brakes. If you live in town and you're constantly on and off, right? Have them checked every 50,000. But on average, if you drive like I do, I get 100,000 miles out of a set of brake pads, right? Yeah, don't let them upsell you. Oh, hey, you need this for this. That's crap, and it's just a money game. It's a money grab because honestly, in the retail auto business, like a retail store, we talk about service absorption, and what they want is they want the service department to pay the entire overhead of the dealership, and everything they make in sales is their profit. So that's the goal of any dealership, and it's kind of one for one. If they sell you $1 in part, they want to sell you $1 in labor. So if it's a $50 part, they're going to charge you at least $50 to put it on, right? I mean, so yeah, buy your own cabin filter, go to Advanced Auto Part, Walmart, buy your own cabin filters, air filters. I recommend get a K&N filter and put them in it, and they're good for a lifetime. Never have to fuss with it again. And you get better fuel mileage.
I need to write down K&N filter then.
Yeah.
Quentin has told me to do that, and I just haven't done it. He gives me a hard time every time I take my car in for service, and I did that last week. So it's always a fun adventure.
Yep, absolutely.
You've got intel right there, Banko. You should be set. I'm on an island over here.
I mean, fair, but listen, Honda holds on to my car for the whole day every single time. I mean, I got an oil change. It took them 4 hours, and
That's
luckily
insane.
I live walking distance. And then they messed up my tires, and then yeah, so it was fun.
Super fun.
I use Take 5 oil change.
Same, good.
They got
All
the
right,
good
sweet.
oils and they're cheap, and they give you a military discount 20%. I'm all good.
I'm glad to know I'm going to the right place then, because I've been loyal to Take Five for a long time, and I just convinced myself that nobody did it better. But if you're going to Take Five, I know I'm doing it right.
Yep, you got her, buddy.
No free ads though. Take Five. We'll take some sort of sponsorship here or future discounts.
Right?
Yes. Well, at risk of putting myself in a hole, I unfortunately am going to have to call it here for us guys. Rob, this has been awesome. I learned a ton. One about you, which is nice because of course most of our interactions are either at the occasional fantasy football draft prior to me dropping out of that league. And Banko, are you still in that league?
I just
Kind
go
of.
play golf now.
All right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or just if I'm happen to be in Florida when you guys are swinging by Tampa to bring something through the apartment or something like that. But I'm glad that I finally had the pleasure of getting to know you on a deeper level and you being vulnerable with us in the audience today. This really has been a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and I enjoyed the experience for sure.
Good. I'm glad. And really, from here, guys, I screwed it up on the last episode, but Banko's back, so hopefully he can pick up my loose ends. Listen to his outro. You guys know how to get in touch with us, and we look forward to seeing y'all next time. Thanks a ton, Rod.
Take care.
Hi, everyone. Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.